Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. And if you've been following along with the content in a kind of chronological order, you'll know that in the previous video, I went over the basic ins and outs of attachment theory. We went into detail about the different categories our attachment styles can fall into, along with how they can show up behaviorally inside of our important relationships pretty much on a daily basis. If you haven't watched that video, take a look somewhere up here where you should find a link that'll take you directly to that content. As promised, in this video, I'm going to go over the way we use the skills of dialectical behaviour therapy and the theories of personality development that we get from schema therapy to effectively shift the way in which we emotionally connect with other people. Before we get into it, I want to make sure that everybody is aware that working from a DBT and schema therapy perspective is not a quick fix. There's no magic wand to be waved. Changing deep-rooted, emotionally activating stories of this nature takes a lot of work, a lot of self-reflection, and a well-rounded understanding for what it means to live the life you want to live by being the person you want to be in the areas of life that are important to you according to your own unique value system. It involves having a solid foundation and understanding of the skills we need, as well as a fundamental willingness to be accountable for our own emotions and therefore our own stories. It's important that this foundation involves having a solid support network that we're reaching out to on a regular basis, a structured lifestyle that incorporates the skills of mindfulness and distress tolerance, and the capacity to take care of our own physical well-being as per the dialectical behaviour therapy please skill. If you recognise the importance of making sure all of that stuff's in place for you and you feel ready to take on this type of work, let's get into it. While the original research for dialectical behaviour therapy was conducted into the treatment of emotional dysregulation and what's known as borderline personality disorder, since that time, extensive research into the use of its skills have been found to be extremely effective at treating many different mental health, addiction, and emotional difficulties. In fact, the DBT skills training program is particularly suited to addressing the specific type of attachment-based behavioural responses that we find with an insecure attachment style. As with everything in dialectical behaviour therapy, it all begins with awareness. If we don't know what it is that we're trying to work with, we have no awareness for what it is that's causing us the problems, so therefore we can't be expected to work with it effectively. So we begin, as always, with mindfulness. Mindfulness skills are part of the foundational work we do to help us build awareness for our automatic, habitual reactions, especially those behavioural responses that are activated by our own unique attachment fears. For example, if we're moving up on the anxiously attached continuum, we may start catastrophizing about a delayed response to a text message we sent recently to a really good friend. While on the other side, if we're high up on the avoidant attachment continuum, this may cause us to feel suffocated or trapped by a person's constant desire to make an emotional connection, pestering us with persistent messages. Mindfulness allows for these triggers to be observed and described non-judgmentally, to create a workable distance between the part of our personality that wants to react and who we actually want to be in an area of life that's clearly very important to us. We try to do this from what we call in DBT a state of wise mind, and when looking through the lens of this compassionate and curious perspective, it supports us with making effective choices rather than becoming blended with the perspective of the emotionally reactive part. Without the capability to notice the distress that comes into our system and move into a state of wise mind, we usually just get blended with the activated part, behaving in an ineffective way that causes problems for us later on. Through the dialectical behaviour therapy what and how skills, we begin to identify the bodily sensations, the thoughts, and the emotions that accompany insecure attachment distress. Over time, the capacity to observe and describe this distress non-judgmentally opens up the opportunity for a behavioural shift away from maladaptive patterns, and it creates the possibility for new interpersonal responses. If we go along with what I learned to be the most effective process to follow in the dialectical behaviour therapy skills training program, next we want to build a tolerance for the emotional distress. This is based in the fundamental principle that if we can't be with the distress that gets activated by a particular story, one that's connected to our insecure attachment style, then it's extremely difficult to change our behavioural responses. In other words, when we're caught in the throes of attachment panic, avoidance or shutdown, simply knowing how to use the skills of distress tolerance is definitely important, but not necessarily the pathway to effective behavioural change. If just knowing something was the way to go, all we'd have to do is read the textbook, learn the skills, and then everything would change. And I'm pretty sure if you've tried this way of doing things yourself, you'll understand that this simply isn't the case. In dialectical behaviour therapy, practicing the skills when we don't need them on a regular basis by building them into our daily schedule slowly turns them into new behavioural habits. This is an absolutely essential part of the DBT skills training program that we simply have to work on understanding and accepting as the way it needs to be. In distress tolerance, everything starts with stop, and whether this leads us into the use of the tip skill for reducing our physiological arousal, whether we start self-soothing through our senses for managing our loneliness, as we learn to do in accepts, or if we're practicing the capacity to sit with emotionally uncomfortable experiences by participating in the use of the improve skill, these repeatable and extremely well-researched skills allow us to be with emotional pain without resorting to old defense like withdrawal from relationships, substance or process addiction, self-harm or emotional manipulation of others, all of which usually go on to create our own personal emotional suffering in one way or another. Importantly, the effective use of the distress tolerance skills can actually enable us to stay in really important and effective relationships long enough to build some new secure attachment experiences, which is an essential condition for the changes we're working towards, changes that lead us towards the internalization of a more stable and secure attachment of our own. Continuing with the process of scaffolding on our DBT skills through mindfulness and distress tolerance, next, the emotion regulation skills target the particular stories connected with the intense emotional experiences common with an insecure attachment style. This is often linked to the fear-based state that's activated by the presence or possible activation of feelings like guilt, shame, envy, jealousy, disgust, and anger. Dialectical behaviour therapy's emphasis on using skills like checking the facts, taking an opposite action, and paying attention to events connected with positive emotional experiences empowers people to respond to situations rather than reacting to perceived threats to attachment. For example, when a person struggling with disorganized attachment experiences a surge of fear in response to closeness, practicing emotion regulation skills away from the distress can provide the capability to shift our perception of the activated story being fact in the current situation. This allows us to first tolerate and then de-escalate the emotional arousal connected to the story, which in turn can pave the way for new, secure attachment behaviours. Attachment is fundamentally about relationships. The Dear Man, Give and Fast skill sets support us in navigating interpersonal scenarios with assertiveness, validation, and self-respect. Anxiously attached individuals often benefit from developing the use of the Dear Man skill to support with the capability of expressing wants and needs without resorting to ineffective learned behaviours, while those that deal with an avoidant attachment may learn through practicing the Give skill to increase respect for others. We do this by understanding the impact of our tone and our demeanour. We approach our relationships with a new curiosity and a new expression of warmth, which creates the overall sense that we are actually present in the moment when engaging in interpersonal conversations. We can also build and then maintain our sense of self-respect through the practice of the Fast skill, something that's often missing for individuals with any of the insecure attachment styles. Over time, the use of these skills helps to begin the complete shift in perception of our learned relationship stories. They restructure the blueprints of the schemas we developed as children, and as we begin to experience more effective and affirming interactions, our internal narrative gradually shifts towards one that supports the development of a stable and secure attachment style. Schema therapy, which was originally researched and developed by Dr. Jeffrey Young, offers a conceptual and, most importantly, experiential framework that is deeply attuned to our attachment wounds. It gives us the capacity to identify our core, maladaptive, and ineffective early childhood schemas, things like abandonment, mistrust, emotional deprivation, defectiveness, or social isolation. These schema and the stories we hold within them reflect and perpetuate our unique insecure attachment patterns. Inside of the schema therapy model, we also work with our schema modes, the different parts of our personality that become the moment-to-moment behavioural responses for our state of emotional distress, the angry, impulsive, or entitled child, as well as parts that are acting as the detached self-soother, the avoidant protector, attention seeker, or compliance surrender modes are all recognizable behavioral responses coming from the different parts of our personality that are responding to our own internal critic in an effort to protect the vulnerable child at the core of our personality system from the perception of emotional pain. And while that might seem like a hell of a lot of information to take in, we can break it down into the following process. A key step in the schema therapy process is developing the capability to identify the stories connected to our dominant schemas. If it's necessary, which it isn't always the case, we can also try to trace these stories to our early childhood experiences, those things that happened to us that were responsible for the development of the schema in the first place. For example, if there's an individual with an abandonment schema, they may remember a persistently unavailable caregiver. Recognizing this as the origin for the story helps us to separate our past experiences from the present situation, and it also plays a massive role in de-shaming our current reactions. The presence of this new awareness within our personality system can assist us in the development of what we call cognitive diffusion, which is an essential aspect of DBT and one that can also open up a critical shift in loosening the rigidity connected to a schema. This can help us to see that our fears about relationships in the current moment are not inevitable truths that are always going to play out. In fact, they're often internalized patterns connected to our psychological filters that we can question and ultimately change. Perhaps the most attachment-focused aspect of schema therapy is the re-education process, one that in the traditional form of schema therapy is referred to as limited reparenting. But personally, I tend to shift away from this particular term as it doesn't seem to go well with the dialectical perspective, as it can create a bit of a rigid pushback from people who resent the past in an aggressive and punitive way. One of the most effective ways to develop our own secure attachment within our personality system is to be around and involved with healthy adults who model this way of being. Sometimes this can be done in a relationship with a therapist, a counsellor, a coach, or a mentor. Sometimes this can be done with people in our support network, those that we might have previously pushed away because they tried to hold us accountable. They set healthy boundaries with us, and they made genuine attempts to meet our unmet emotional needs within appropriate boundaries, modelling a secure attachment style. These reparative relationships become a living experience of secure attachment, and the vulnerable child at the core of our system begins to learn that our emotional needs can be met safely. Over time, the personality system begins to become more balanced. We internalize these feelings into our own self-to-part relationship, which is absolutely key to being able to self-validate when external validation is not available to us in the moment. Attachment insecurity is often sustained by our own ineffective modes of behaviour. For example, if a person is anxiously attached, they may mode flip between the activation of the vulnerable child and the protection mechanism, which shows up as the need for an angry child reaction, seeking reassurance and validation, and then lashing out when it's not received in the specific way it's wanted. An individual with an avoidant attachment may live predominantly in the avoidant or detached self-soother mode, procrastinating and distancing themselves or numbing emotional needs with substance and process, avoiding emotional closeness. Through experiential techniques like imagery rescripting, which is done in conjunction with the DBT skill of planning ahead to build mastery, and the Raven exercise, which was developed specifically by the Liberation Place, Schema therapy helps us to access these modes, validate the unmet needs that are driving them, and gradually shift towards the healthy adult perspective we get from a state of wise mind. When in this state, we are guided by our own values system, which helps us to set internal boundaries with our parts. We can comfort the vulnerable child and pursue emotional intimacy in a grounded and regulated way. While DBT provides concrete skills for managing emotional and interpersonal dysregulation, schema therapy addresses the deeper relational wounds and the internalized voices that actually maintain an insecure attachment style. Used together, these approaches are extremely effective at shifting our perspectives and removing a rigid point of view. For example, if you're someone with a strong abandonment schema, you may experience an intense level of fear for the feelings of rejection when a partner withdraws. DBT's distress tolerance and mindfulness skills can help pause, regulate the body, and avoid our old ineffective behaviours. Then, schema therapy can help to explore the childhood origin of the stories in the system and offer a new point of view to re-educate this system and soothe the underlying wound. If you recognise that you're someone who uses an avoidant attachment style to keep you safe inside of relationship dynamics, maybe you use the avoidant protector mode to avoid conflict and connection. DBT's interpersonal effectiveness skills can help to express your emotional needs, while schema therapy explores the fear for the loss of control underlying the activated mode of behaviour. The important thing to remember is that this all takes time. There's a necessary process to follow, and it's extremely important that we do actually follow this process to reach the objective we're attempting to reach. Resisting the temptation to give in to the problem with instant gratification, skipping to the end looking for a quick fix, then wondering why it doesn't work and blowing the whole thing up. Start with building a solid foundation. Work on understanding your own unique values system. Define the areas of life that are important to you. Know what it means to be the person that you want to be inside of these areas, and then document what your beliefs are about the common core values. Build your awareness through mindfulness skills. Learn to sit with emotional distress, to tolerate its presence within your system without running away from it at the first sign of emotional pain. Eventually, we can shift the perception of the stories and change the attachment style we learned as a child into one that helps us to live the life we want to live. Attachment styles are not fixed destinies, though shaped by early experiences, they can be transformed through consistent and intentional work. Dialectical behaviour therapy offers the skills to manage the storms of attachment distress, while schema therapy provides the roadmap to the wounds beneath them. Together they form a robust and compassionate framework for healing those wounds we hold within our personality system. In the end, the journey from insecure to secure attachment is not merely about behaviour change, it is a reorganisation of the self around our newly developed perceptions. It's about the development of new stories that help us to recognise that we are indeed worthy, that other people can be safe for us to be involved with, and that loving, caring relationships don't always have to hurt. Guys, I hope this video gave you some insight for how we use the skills of DBT when they're integrated with the theories of schema therapy to change our attachment style. If you want to know more, come join the live online meetings that I facilitate for free each week on Zoom. I'll leave a link to the page containing more information about these groups in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, throw a like on this particular video, and turn on the notifications to get all the latest from me and the Liberation Place. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon. Take care, be safe, and be well.